What I thought I'd talk about briefly tonight is a lesson that I heard in the Fellows program, but didn't really begin to believe until some rocky times on the job forced me to kind of examine what I thought I held as a truth. And that is this idea, this claim that our value as people in God's economy is not based solely or primarily on what we produce, what we achieve. Now, that's a pretty easy thing to say and to hear. We all get that right in the Sunday school question, but to actually believe that, I found, at least personally, is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And the reason for that is because it goes completely contrary to the way our day-to-day economy works. I'm hired, I'm promoted, I'm fired based on what I do, based on what I produce, what I achieve, my level of success. So the idea that we live in that reality day to day, minute to minute, and yet we're trying to hold on to this other truth that we hear, that in fact God's goodness and what Christ has done for us is in fact our true identity. That's a tough thing. And I realize in a period of difficult work experiences, I mentioned that I needed to kind of deepen my belief in that. It was a time when I was selling drugs, actually. Now, thankfully, they were legal, also called pharmaceuticals. It was 2006, and I had gotten a job as a pharmaceutical sales rep. Now, for those of you who don't know much about the pharma industry, essentially, pharmaceutical reps are located all across the country, and their daily routine is to go visit physicians and bring clinical trials, information about the correct patients for the medication, side effects, with the hope of having more prescriptions written for that particular drug. The company organizes for each sales representative a bar that's set every year for the number of scripts they'd like written in that area. And it's a big algorithm of the number of patients they have in that area, the number of physicians, the type of formulary coverage for insurance that you have. It's a big witch's brew of things. But at the end of every year, or rather to begin a year, each rep has a bar to achieve. Well, when I started, I inherited a territory at number one. Before I had gone into a single doctor's office, I was already top of the heap. I was the man that entire year. So every sales meeting we went to, my name was in lights as the number one sales rep in that region and the entire East Coast. I was nominated for Rookie of the Year. I was invited to do different sales advisory teams. I hadn't done anything, but yet I was getting all these accolades, and man, I was loving it, right? Life was good. And this continued for a while. Kind of trailed off for a couple of years. I was still, if not number one, up toward the top. But then I was always kind of curious, what would happen if I sold a product that was just mine exclusively? See, all these other products that I sold had a legacy of dozens of reps prior to me coming on the scene, of talking to doctors about it. So I always kind of felt like, this clearly isn't all my doing. And about 4 years in, I had an opportunity to sell a brand new product, a diabetes drug called Tradjenta. I don't know where they come up with these names, but it was mine. I was the only guy who had ever spoken of this thing. Doctors had never heard of it. And I thought, this is great. It's my chance to prove to myself and to the company, just how great a sales guy I am. So I doubled down on my territory, hit out there for the first week, talked about my product, how it's better than the other competitors, fewer side effects. At the end of the week, I checked my weekly sales report, 0 prescriptions. No big deal. It's early, plenty of time to go. Double my efforts for the following week, 0 prescriptions. Next week, 0 prescriptions. 4 months into visiting doctors, 8 to 10 times a day, for the entire 4 months, not a single prescription was written. And I ended that year at the very last place out of 43 people on the East Coast. You can imagine the tune of my management and my own internal excitement was quite different than how it began. And I realized in that time, with all the pressure and all of the strain that goes along with being in a sales organization and being absolutely bottom of the pile, that I had my identity in the wrong place. It wasn't that obvious when I was on top, because it's nice to be recognized in those ways. But as soon as it was the flip side of that, I realized I was in trouble. Well, God has a sense of humor, and in about a 2-week period after I was at the bottom of the pile for sales, we were coming up on the new year, and that bar was going to be recalibrated for me and every other sales rep. And in the matter of one day, between December 31st and January 1st, I went from 43rd on the East Coast to 1st on the East Coast and 2nd in the nation, all because that algorithm worked it out and decided that I had a new bar. It was so laughable, it just made me realize, man, I have been tying up who I thought myself to be, not just in work, not just in my profession, but it cut deeper than that, right? It was who I am as a man, who I am as a provider for my family. And it was just a nice reminder from God as I saw it to realize that this is not a steady ground to find my identity. Colossians 3:3 in the Message version says it nicely. Paul says, your old life is dead, your new life, which is your real life, he says, even though it's invisible to spectators, that is with Christ and God. I love that part about hidden from spectators, because I feel like if all of us can truly believe this, I don't fully believe it, that my life is hemmed up in God. I hope to believe that more and more as I get older and more experienced, but I still think I have to earn a place at the table, not just in terms of God's grace toward me, but in my day-to-day work, I'm trying to be on top and trying to believe this more and more each day. And I hope each of you, as you go out into your own careers from here, that you remember that as well, and we can all continue to grow in that together. Thanks for having me along tonight.